What are some of your early memories on the island?
My family is from Philadelphia and always went to Atlantic City. In fact, my grandfather had a business in Atlantic City. My mother spent some time in her childhood there. So there was a strong Atlantic City connection. And we had relatives in Margate. So my family always rented for the summer. And I never spent a summer in the city home, always at the beach. So we used to go to Ventnor. And my father had a boyhood friend, a Boy Scout buddy, who kept telling him about a house he was building. And you got to come down and see where I'm building my own house. He was an engineer, Jewish engineer, and he wanted the challenge of building a house for himself. He had a wife and a daughter. His daughter is a member of the JCC and lives in the house her father built. So the story goes on. So my father said, but one winter night, one March day, let's take a ride and see this house that Jerry's building he's talking about so much. So we took a ride for the first time to Long Beach Island and came over the bridge and landed in Ship Bottom. And I remember my brothers and I getting such a giggle out of a name of a town called Ship Bottom. And we found this house that Jerry was building. And my parents took a look around and said, look at this place. Look at this place. There's no place here that you can't get to the beach on foot. Because we were renting in Ventnor, which was where my parents could afford, was too far a walk. You had to have a second car, which was always a problem. Anyway, from that particular day, right then and there, they decided to go to a realtor and they bought a house. Totally never having been on the island.
What are some of your early memories on the island?
In the summer of 1953. And for me, it was paradise because I had total freedom. In Atlantic City, I was confined. In Ventnor, I was confined to my neighborhood and dependent on my parents. Here, I could wander anywhere. I wandered, and my brothers and I, my little brother, I used to push him in the carriage, in the stroller, and we had chores. First of all, the washing machine was a wringer washer, and it fit under the stairs. So every Monday, we had to wash and hang the clothes on the clothesline, which I thought was fun. I thought clotheslines and hanging clothes was fun. So we would get that washing machine out to the sink and hook it up and I don't know if you've ever seen a wringer washer, but it's a process. You have to use the kitchen sink because the wringer goes over the kitchen sink and it rinses the sudsy water back to the tub and into the clean water in the sink. And then you have to wring it again to put it in the basket to take it outside. Anyway, so Monday morning we always washed, but my brother and I, for years, there was no mail delivery. So we had to go to the post office. And we never got enough mail to really warrant a post office box. So we stood in line at the window and we would ask, and very politely, is there any mail for our family? And we would give our address. And the post mistress, it was a lady, and this post office was on Maryland, which is somewhere around where Wawa is, in that vicinity. So we used to walk to the post office. We would also we'd have to go to Marvel's, which was where Wawa is. The post office was a block further, and buy a Philadelphia Inquirer for my family. And then we would come home. So, and sometimes I had to buy cigarettes for my grandmother. So that was our daily routine. Breakfast, our walk to get the mail and the newspaper or do the wash, and then come home. By this time, it was time to go to the beach. And we went to the beach only in the morning for a swim. We didn't play. We only went for a swim. And then we come home and have lunch, and we were never allowed out in the midday sun. We had to go to the library, or we had to do activities. We read. I don't remember what we did, but we never went out again before 2:30 or 3 o'clock. And then we stayed at the beach. And then we were allowed to actually stay and play. And we stayed on the beach until we had to come home for supper. So that was what life was like for me in my early childhood. So by the time I was 11 or 12, it's time for me to go to work. So my father decided we should have a paper route. And we contacted the Philadelphia Inquirer. And lo and behold, my brothers and I got a paper route. And we delivered the Philadelphia Inquirer. Actually, my brother did most of the delivery. I'm 3 years older than he, so he was 10 or 11. I helped him sometimes, but I collected the money. I would go around and collect the money from the subscribers. And we, we had a delivery person who came and dropped the papers off in front of our house every morning. And he came and collected the money. So we had this paper route. And then my father, who was very creative, decided we could make more money if we got a lot of Sunday papers. And we went outside of the church in Beach Haven, one of the churches, and sold to the people as they came out of church, saving them a trip to the store for the Philadelphia Inquirer. So we started making big time until the shops in Beach Haven, like the drugstore Kapler's, who was selling newspapers, got wind of it and put a stop to it. They called the distributor and told us to stop selling papers outside of the church because it was impeding the business of the local merchants. So that project had a successful short run.
How would you describe your life as a Jew on LBI?
A teenager, I was aware that there was a JCC at the Baldwin Hotel. They used to have dances for teenagers. So we would go, but we didn't know anybody. I mean, I didn't know anybody, I just knew the kids in my neighborhood. And most of those kids were not Jewish. So I didn't have really anybody to go with. My gang, there was one other Jewish family, and it was a boy who was a couple years older than I was, and he wasn't interested. So I went a couple times, but I didn't really connect. But I knew that there was a very Jewish community in what was called the Park, Beach Haven Park. And all these people were JCC people. And then there was another whole group of Jewish people, like gang, that were around Taylor Avenue in Beach Haven. And they said this one woman, the mother of the Jewish boy in our neighborhood, she hung out with them. And she played mahjong and she played cards with them. My mother didn't want to have anything to do with that. My mother was a reader. She was a very solitary person, and she liked her peace and quiet. And she was friendly with this other woman. They would sit together and chat on the beach and things like that. But she wasn't interested in a woman's social get together. But we heard about it, and I knew about it. But it wasn't a focus. We were Jewish at home. We had Shabbat. My father came down, but we just didn't have any real connection until I was an adult and came back. So that's the background, pretty much.
What brought you back to LBI and back to connecting?
Oh, I never left. Never left LBI.
Okay.
When I got married, and my brother was in the service, my younger brother was still at home. That little house that we had added a porch to the front needed a lot of work. It needed, all kinds of attention. And with my brother and I, the two of us gone, my parents didn't think it was a good idea. So they sold it. They sold it in around 1964 for what I think was about $35,000. And for one summer, they didn't have a place to go, my parents. And they realized they missed it terribly. So they started looking around again to come back to LBI. And meanwhile, they made some money on that house, so they had some money to work with. In 1962, there was a horrendous storm that really devastated the island, much like Sandy did. And a house in Pihala Park, oceanfront house, washed away. And the property was caught in some kind of a legal dispute about whether the wind came and destroyed the house first or the flood washed it away or some such thing. And when my parents were looking in 1964, this lot all of a sudden became available. So they bought an oceanfront lot in Pihala Park in 1966. No, 64, 65. Right, by this time it was 65. And they decided to build, which was permissible at the time, a 2-family house, because we couldn't afford to live in a 1-family house. So if it was an income property, that would make it work. So they built a house in 65, 66. The first summer was 66, a 2-family house in Pihala Park on 90th Street. And that's where we are. My parents built that house. Unfortunately, their marriage did not survive. And in 1973, my husband and I bought the property from them during the divorce settlement. And that's where we are. We built that house in 2008. It's still a 2-family house. So if you know anybody who wants to rent a nice oceanfront apartment. So that's the story. So I've never, ever left. We came back owning that house in 1973 and started to get back involved into the community. I don't think we joined the JCC actually as members until my dad passed away. When my dad passed away, I realized that he had an incredibly strong connection to the island, and I wanted to reconnect Jewishly as well as, you know, my beach connection, which I always had, but I wanted to take this to another level. And we, the rabbi there at the time was Rabbi Jack, and we had a memorial service at the beach and remembered my dad, and that's when we reconnected. I've been happy ever since, happily ever after.
What was your initial involvement with the JCC like? What inspired it?
I don't think we joined the JCC actually as members until my dad passed away. When my dad passed away, I realized that he had an incredibly strong connection to the island, and I wanted to reconnect Jewishly as well as, you know, my beach connection, which I always had, but I wanted to take this to another level. And we, the rabbi there at the time was Rabbi Jack, and we had a memorial service at the beach and remembered my dad, and that's when we reconnected. I've been happy ever since, happily ever after.
What are some of your favorite things about the JCC?
I retired all of a sudden, and my kids started to go hither and yon. I realized I wanted friends. I wanted a community. And that's when I realized how invaluable the JCC is on all levels. I mean, I was seeking to fulfill a need for being connected, to meeting new people, to meet, you know what, this is a silly thing, but I wanted to go into the Acme and walk with my head up to see if I could say hello to anybody. Not because that's where in Highland Park where I am, you can't go into the supermarket without taking forever, because every aisle you bump into somebody. How are you? How are the kids? What's doing? And that's what it was funny. That was my, isn't that a crazy criteria? But I wanted to be able to go into the Acme and hopefully bump into somebody that I felt good about bumping into. So thank you for including me.
Oh, you're most welcome. Thank you for giving me your time this morning. I greatly appreciate it.